So there's this TikTok I saw recently where this guy interprets, explains the meaning of South Park episode 509, Osama bin Laden has farty pants. And I can't stop thinking about it. It's sort of like if my brain was a house and this video was a guy, it would be kind of living in the house, which is my brain, and doing so, it wouldn't even pay me any rent. Subscribe for more metaphors. This episode is about the boys getting shipped to Afghanistan during the American invasion and meeting their Afghani counterparts. According to this guy, the episode staunchly opposes the war on terror in a time where that was frowned upon.
But South Park made commentary that nobody else was brave enough to make at the time.
Which, on the whole, the episode is a little confused. The post 9/11 paranoia is definitely parodied to a degree, but it's with the tone of people are too serious sometimes, not really carrying any political weight. When the kids get to Afghanistan, the arguments they have with their counterparts are hard to parse. Like, the creators don't seem super interested in why people hate America.
Why does a third of the world hate us? Because you don't realize that a third of the world hates you!
And these Looney Tunes bits with Bin Laden could be a parody of World War II era cartoons, mocking their patriotism that relies on racial characters, or maybe it's just doing that, unironically. Hard to say. That is, until we see the end of the episode.
Dude, I almost thought those Afghani kids talked you into not liking America. No, dude. America may have some problems, but it's our home. Our team. And if you don't want to root for your team, then you should get the hell out of the stadium. Yeah. Go America.
Yeah. If there's one thing this episode is, it's not a critique of the war on terror. I mean, please just use some common sense. Michael Moore and the Dixie Chicks both faced backlash for criticizing the Iraq War in 2003. This was South Park's first post-9/11 episode. If they actually aired an anti-American show, people would have lost their shit. But there wasn't any real backlash I could find. It was even up for an Emmy. The loss of that Futurama episode where Fry becomes his own grandfather, which makes sense, really. You can't compete with that.
One deviled egg.
Deviled egg?
The same deviled egg.
Hi, so I'm in the editing room here. I'm trying to find a visual for saying that the thing won an Emmy, and the best I got was like this, and this is awful. Like, this is just so ugly. But I did find a 90-minute video of these two guys discussing this specific award category from these specific Emmys, and I don't know what to tell you. They agree with me. The Futurama episode should have won, and the South Park episode was a failure. So, yeah, suck on that.
So, why was this blatant misinterpretation made in the first place? Well, I can only speculate, but I do kind of see where this post is coming from. I was born after 9/11, and so it's hard for me to believe that most of the country was behind a war that I've only ever learned about being a mistake. But also, I want to like South Park. A lot of cool, normal people like it, and it's something I've found funny at times. And if it were problematic, that would be a big realization. So I'm much more likely to accept evidence that it's a left-wing show, which it really isn't. Lastly, let's look at this bit with Sharon on the couch.
We then see how Stan's mother is laying in front of the TV, and we see that she's no longer taking care of herself. She's just sitting there in this completely traumatized state, all of her food and everything around her, and she's just sitting there watching the news and all of the things unfolding, all of the brainwashing and propaganda.
What? After 9/11, a lot of people were glued to their TVs in real life. And
like Stan's mom being addicted to the news, that was just a very real thing, the 24-hour news cycle.
And I agree that this was because the media preyed on their fears, but I don't think Parker and Stone feel that way. I think they just noticed that a lot of people seem pretty scared. But nothing in the episode suggests that it's brainwashing. We kind of just invented that. I bring all of this up because it's a pretty egregious example of a common online trend. A lot of online leftists have made a video or like a tweet or something recently about media literacy. Typically it features a conservative saying they like a movie, and then a leftist utterly schooling them and explaining how it's actually making fun of them. And today, I want to talk about the origins and some of the consequences of that trend. Five Nights at Freddy's is an upcoming indie horror series that I have at least one opinion about. And while it's known for its fandom, music, and something else, one of its most unacknowledged features is the satirical element. I'm dead serious. You think I'd fucking lie to you about FNAF? I have never been more serious. So early FNAF, you play as a minimum wage worker in a shitty pizzeria, and you listen to these training tapes. Both a lot of the information we're given and the basic premise of the game is put towards showing you how shitty this job is to you. There's no real considerations for employee safety, killer robots. There's awful pay, and you could be fired at the end. An especially brutal example is the Springlock suit tape.
In the case that the spring locks come loose while you are wearing a suit, please try to maneuver away from populated areas before bleeding out, as to not ruin the customer experience.
This is a satire of the conditions working minimum wage jobs. Fully a satire. It imitates corporate training tapes and exaggerates their carelessness in order to critique them. It also likely comes from a place of sincerity because Scott was working minimum wage while making the first game. So does this mean FNAF is actually a leftist critique of capitalism? Fuck no! Scott Cawthon is a Trump supporter, he isn't a leftist at all. Art isn't ever perfectly planned and produced. Media can often say something about its creator or their world without that being the intent. Scott Cawthon, even if he wouldn't put it in these terms, knows the feeling of being exploited, and that feeling ended up in the art he created. And Parker and Stone understood, on some level, the nature of the invasion and the paranoia. And while they didn't critique it, they did depict it, which will at least get you somewhere. Let's go back in time to a couple years ago when LeftTube began to pick up steam. Now, a lot of LeftTubers, going back even to Anita Sarkeesian, focus on media criticism. This made it a lot more common to look at a work through a leftist lens and try and find stuff out. I want to make it very clear, that isn't bad. These are some of the best written, well thought out, and entertaining videos I've seen on YouTube. But surprisingly, they're not that political. I say that because they just presume a leftist perspective instead of arguing for it.
I try to come by the topics I come by just by way of media analysis, as opposed to any kind of hardcore political things that I make, which really they're not in the videos.
Through the lens of narrative, and has evolved into longer format documentary discussing scams, social movements, and history through the lens of narrative.
I'm not trying to qualify anything I say, except as a student of media studies.
And this makes sense. They're basically movie reviews. Nostalgia Critic doesn't end with a call to action. He just says that a movie is a shitload of fuck. And Lindsay Ellis doesn't either. She just determines if the politics of a movie are irresponsible or not. One is a lot more meaningful and important than the other, but they're both really only focused on one thing, the qualities of a movie. But as this genre of YouTube expanded, it grew in importance. It pushed back against Gamergate and de-radicalized people. And now, people are learning leftism from movie reviews. And looking at and thinking about media becomes much more important to politics. But that creates a problem. Rather than judge something based on its message, people start to work backwards and fit the message to their opinion of the work. And this leads to the inversion of what I liked about LeftTube. We're no longer being curious or learning lessons or handling a nuanced subject.
Text shows neo-Nazism and white supremacy is bad, but isn't it also kind of badass?
The potent imagery, structured as a condemnation, was still adopted by people who saw the violence not as horrifying, but as aspirational.
Can we look at one thing in a movie we think is morally wrong and just use that to call it satire? Can I call Birth of a Nation satire because it is a bunch of shit in it that I don't like?
It just turns into my team made a good movie that your team isn't allowed to enjoy. Additionally, since these videos had no call to action, the substitute became just don't like movies with conservative politics. So now there's this idea that if you're capable of enjoying a conservative-leaning show, you're a bad leftist. That's not true, and I don't think that was ever the message of these vids.
But remember that it's both possible, and even necessary, to simultaneously enjoy media, while also being critical of its more problematic or pernicious aspects.
Obviously don't financially support bad people, but you're allowed to think conservative art is good on the surface level, a catchy song, a pretty painting. What you shouldn't do is tell everyone the work is leftist when it really isn't. If you like something, you should also be conscious of its message and flaws, because if you aren't analyzing the media you watch, it is brainwashing you.
If you are not analyzing the media, it is brainwashing you.
Oh, that's weird. Oh, wow, Quintaspoon, what a great video, you say in a sarcastic manner. I had no idea people on Twitter and TikTok could be wrong about stuff. You say also sarcastically. Yeah, good point. TikTok and Twitter are particularly bad places for any kind of discourse. It's not surprising people took these ideas in the wrong direction, but I really don't think they could have been taken in the right direction. I don't think a political movement built on art criticism was ever going to work. And here's why. In 1957, during the Algerian Revolution, the French military seized Maurice Audin, a scientist and anti-colonial activist, and he subsequently disappeared. Many suspected he was tortured to death, something which would be confirmed in 2018. However, at the time, this caught the attention of filmmaker and critic Francois Truffaut, who considered making a film about Audin's murder. Ultimately, he never made the film, and this was his reasoning.
The affair is so clear in itself that it needs no comment. Perhaps it could be done by sticking to the facts. But a fiction film entails looking for other people's motives, not just their political motives, but their personal motives. In the end, the film would merely consist in showing a victim, a man who had been subjected to an entirely unjust and appalling fate, and, on the other, the mechanism leading up to it. This would be inappropriate, for to show something is to ennoble it. A film of this kind would satisfy neither Madame Audin nor the Audin Committee, because the other people's motives would have to be investigated, which would require being interested in the agonies of conscience of, this will make you bristle, General Massu, who allowed torture in Algeria and covered it up.
And Truffaut was probably right in his prediction. If this movie was made, you'd probably see some assholes take the side of the French military, and other people might accuse them of lacking media literacy, but Truffaut understood that the problem is in the nature of media itself. Even something like American Psycho, which was absolutely made with the intent of being a satire, still has people empathize with Patrick Bateman, and are they missing the point? Not really. If you're an asshole IRL and you like an asshole in a movie, you aren't wrong. He might literally be you. Art just makes terrible political ammunition because it's so flexible. Narratives aren't nearly as clear as essays or even video essays, and people still misinterpret those. So while I love looking at media and thinking critically about it, having discussions on quality and intent and meaning, and I plan to keep making videos where I do that, it's not how we should be conducting politics. The value of art is that it can teach us valuable lessons and express complicated emotions, not make rigorous arguments. And all that art can teach us something. Everything in this video is a lesson that comes from art. No matter the politics, if looked at critically, work of art can play an important role in our lives. Except for, well, you know.
Just a bit of a Halloween jump scare there for you. Yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought. I'm just doing this for the love of the discourse right now, so let me know what you thought of my crazy ideas. Thank you for all the support on the two previous videos. It got a lot of more views than I expected, and it was great to see all the comments. Yeah, here's to 100 more fantastic videos.